she's in another session, but maybe we need to start because we have too many, and she can join us. So good afternoon. Welcome to this important session that is really addressing a key issue in today's world and for the scientific community in many parts of the world, that is really freedom and safety of scientists. As you know, this is a very important topic for UNESCO. We have a recommendation related to this topic, a call of action also from our member states recognizing the need to do more in order to protect the freedom of scientists, but also to protect the scientists themselves. And really, I think I'm very happy to be here with you today with the wonderful panel composed by several voices, several stakeholders that have a play in this important topic. And really why this emphasis on protecting the intellectual autonomy of scientists? First of all, from our view, is a foundation of open and transparent science ecosystems, and the key for consolidating trust in science, a topic that has been very central in many panels discussed. How can we guarantee or strengthen the trust in science? We also believe that if we don't have this transparency, this autonomy, it's going to be very hard for policymakers to take science advice as an independent advice, and therefore we are also losing the opportunity to influence decision-making at highest level. Also, when the critical voice of scientists are silenced, our society's ability to produce relevant and unbiased knowledge, to think critically and to distinguish true from falsehood is also undermined. So we are not only protecting the scientific community by protecting their autonomy, by protecting themselves, but we are also protecting the critical ability of society to really critically understand what is in the table and separate what is truth from false and fake information. We also believe that when the scientific community is depreciated or worse, destroyed, as it happened in many places, our society's long-term ability to recover and grow is jeopardized. And we have seen again that in many parts of the world where a strong attempt to destroy the scientific communities and scientific ecosystems really take away the possibility of countries and societies really to grow and to recover from those pressures. Available data is telling, because 22% of survey participants reported receiving threats of violence after engaging with the media on COVID-19 related topics in 2021. Likewise, 39% of respondents to another survey indicated that they had faced online harassment or abuse connected to their climate research. Women scientists remain particularly vulnerable, often encountering sexual harassment in the workplace, and the risks faced by researchers working in conflict zones, as you know, remain an often overlooked issue. In response, UNESCO member states launched in 2023 a program to promote scientific freedom and safety of scientists. This initiative builds on the UNESCO 27 recommendation on science and scientific researchers, which frames science as a driver of human well-being and shared prosperity, and not just as a source of growth and productivity. The call to action on the freedom and safety of scientists, co-sponsored by 6 countries in March, along with a focused commitment in the recent UN Pact for the Future, underscores therefore UNESCO leadership in championing this cause. It is important to highlight the connection between intellectual autonomy and open science, as emphasized in UNESCO 2021 recommendation on open science. The International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, starting this year, so from 2024 to 2033, will be instrumental in driving this agenda forward. To turn this vision into reality, we must work collectively across sectors and disciplines. We need coordinated and coherent action from governments, scientific institutions, and civil society at the national, regional, and international levels. Together we can create an environment where scientists can improve freely, innovate freely, and their safety and rights are protected. So really, this topic of freedom and safety of scientists, it has several dimensions and have several stakeholders that have a saying and an action and a responsibility to ensure that that freedom and that safety is there. And that's why this wonderful panel that we have with us today will take a deep dive in the issues at hand. And really, I'm very happy to have with us Mr. Assad Ranzanali, Special Assistant to the President, Chief of Staff, and Deputy Director for Strategy from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. We have Mr. Cecil Buti Masoka, Director of the National Department of Science and Innovation of South Africa, and His Excellency Minister Blade sends his regrets that he cannot be with us today. We will also be joined later, because she's in another session, with Professor Karisha Abdul Karim, that is the President of the World Academy of Sciences. We have of course, Matthias Johnson, Executive Director of ALEA, all European academies. Karisha, welcome, and sorry that we start, but we are a little bit tight with time, but we know that you were rushing from another panel. Welcome to this panel on freedom and safety of journalists. Also, Gustavo Merino, Director of Social Policies from UNESCO Social and Human Science Sector. And of course, Dr. Tracy Elliott, a freelancer consultant, but someone that have been involved on science frameworks and science policy, and particularly also with the World Science Forum for many years. So welcome to all of you, and thank you very much to join us today. We are going to start with a few introductory remarks, max 7 minutes for each of the panelists, and really, can you, all of you, in your interventions, can you provide an opening statement within your context and regarding policy challenges, highlighting good practices or offering recommendations for promoting scientific freedom and ensuring safety of scientists. So we want to start by listening from where you come from and what your organizations are already putting in place of best practices, but also where you see gaps that then we can address in more concrete questions as we go along with the panel. So I'm going to start with you, Assad, to kick off these introductory remarks. Thank you.
Great. And thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for hosting this topic. We were talking earlier, there could be few more important things to discuss. This is such a critical topic. Right now, we see a slate of threats to freedom and safety across the world that impact scientists, but also all people. And I'll talk a little bit about two buckets, and I think you referenced both. One is war, and the other is the threats to women, minorities, LGBTQ individuals. These are legitimate threats to people and therefore scientists, because the scientific community exists within that context of society. And that threat to our collective freedom is a threat to our collective science. And so I start from that premise of what's the bigger picture context that impacts everybody. Cultivating freedom, even though it seems so far from the work of a scientist in a lab, is our work. It is the work that enables academic freedom and scientific integrity and physical freedom that allows for the work that we need to do. So in practice, what this looks like to us is promoting academic freedom, meaning keeping our work open and transparent. It means checking and building on each other's work. It means sharing results with everybody worldwide. It means inspiring and mentoring the next generation to use science and tech to improve our world and to make it safer and healthier and more prosperous. It means that scientific institutions need to have the guardrails to enable their scientists to be independent and to have the autonomy to think creatively and freely. Promoting physical freedom means establishing a strict standard of respect in classrooms and labs and all the places that science and technology happens. That means respect for every single person and who they are. No one should ever face harassment or indignities or disrespect in their work. That's true of us, but it's true of other communities as well. When we share our work and when we uplift each other, we can achieve much more than what we could do in silos. All of that rests on a foundation of a notion that you are free and safe to be who you are in society, beyond your work as a scientist and outside of any lab or classroom or other context in which you work. You have to be free to decide what you're doing with your body. You have to be free to love who you love. You have to be free to pray to any God or no God at all. You have to be free to write whatever you want without fear of consequence. You have to be able to publish. You have to be able to do all of this without fear of reprisal or that the government is going to come after you. As we all know, war destroys everything, and these freedoms become less easy to see and less easy to protect. In addition to the unacceptable violence impacting all of the people who are involved in war and the lands and communities and global and generational ripple effects, we also lose the opportunity to move humanity forward through the tools that we bring as a community, science and technology. That's critically important. So with respect to war in particular, Russia's illegal and unprecedented war in Ukraine, we've done a number of things. In addition to condemning the war, in the US, we've partnered with many nations to launch a program, ImpressU, that supports Ukrainian scientists. We have to do much more than that. We all have to come together and support scientists who are in those situations. Even in places where science infrastructure isn't developed, war is a threat to the goals that we have, that we share as a community. It's hard to see victims of war being able to do the science we want when they've fled their homes and research communities where they otherwise might be discovering the next vaccines for diseases we suffer from. It's hard to see these victims of war when conducting the science, when they're in refugee camps instead of possibly working on the next climate solutions. And it's hard to see these victims of war doing the work of science when they're suffering instead of pursuing dreams to study clean energy or to inspire the next generation of scientists. And so my call is our work is much deeper than what happens on a bench or at a lab. It's the work of freedom, and that's the work of society, but we're members of that. Again, thank you for hosting this, and I just wanted to start with those thoughts.
Thank you very much, Assad, and I think you set the stage in two important aspects. One is the effects of war and conflicts, and in many cases also of natural disasters. Unfortunately, in a world facing climate change and bigger disasters, you also see a lot of science infrastructure and scientists and their families being affected, but clearly war in today's world is a key issue that I'm sure several other members of the panel will address, but also the issue of minorities and respect for who people are in their choices in life. And I think that's a very important aspect also. And you didn't dwell too much on the topics, but I hope another colleagues will bring that, because there are also some topics that researchers working on those topics, they are more prone to get arrested or even violently assault by people. But I will go to Sally. Sally, you come from a different region with different experiences, but with the same, probably with the same kind of challenges. So you have 7 minutes for the first speech.
No, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I think you did mention the issue of researchers and scientists that are operating in conflict zones. Assad also mentioned that challenge, but I think people who were in today's morning session, where the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation from South Africa mentioned the need for the global action against and pronouncement against the genocide that's happening in Palestine is quite critical to preserving the scientists that are operating in those spaces. But what he didn't mention further is that as South Africa, we have issued out a call, a research call, between South Africa and Palestinians in the diaspora to continue collaborating and preserving their dignity in practicing science, technology, innovation, and research. Now, in the South African context, there's a lot of freedom that we provide, and the safety that is sort of guaranteed from the government for our researchers and scientists to pursue their activities in research and innovation. But what is also important is that there is some level of responsibility that gets attached to these freedoms. It's not a blanket check. And for us, we're looking at the genetic modification of plant genes for profit purposes has contributed to global poverty and food insecurity. I remember when I was growing up, if I threw a tomato in my yard and then it starts raining, in 3 weeks or 2 weeks, I'll be seeing the plant growing. If I do that with genetically modified tomatoes now, I'll never see the growth of those plants. And that, for me, it means we're contributing in one form or the other in terms of the science that we're practicing towards food security challenges, especially in the global south. The third component, maybe that I would like to mention, it's also the safety of the global south scientists against the global north mainstream media. Professor Karim and her colleagues in South Africa during the COVID and with partnering with international researchers discovered a variant, a new variant in South Africa through their research activities. Now, the reporting at a global stage says that is a South African variant. Now, it means there's no respect for the type of work that is done at a global south level in terms of expertise and excellence in science, to the point of attaching the variant to a specific country without recognizing actually that it's a variant identified and discovered by the excellence and expertise in the global south researchers. So you have a challenge where the safety and the labeling and the tags that are attached to global south researchers immediately hampers them operating at a global stage and expressing or even sharing some of their discoveries. Now, going back also to this issue of conflicts and scientists operating in conflict areas, what the minister didn't also mention is that it's not only Palestine genocide that is actually happening. We also have a series of other wars within the continent. The instability in Sudan, what we see in the Democratic Republic of Congo with proxy wars that are happening to destabilize these countries, so that people can have access to critical mineral resources. Indirectly also means the challenge for the researchers to be able to participate meaningfully in the science enterprise. And for us, it's much broader and bigger than things that are reported in the mainstream, but there are others that are actually happening and they're not properly covered. And that in itself is also a challenge because it's similar experiences and challenges and similar safety issues that are actually need to be addressed in that particular space. And then lastly, of course, it's the issue of professional pressures that emerging young scientists and researchers are experiencing, either in the lab or even outside. And now with the social media, this is what you mentioned, that expressing opinions also attracts not only the attention and appreciation of an intellectual conversation, but the actual attacking and classifications of people, especially women, especially people from different groupings and so on. So that in itself, it's also something that we think is a challenge, but from where we are sitting as South Africa, we think that this is one of the topics that we will want to continue engaging in, not only at the African level, but also at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecile, because I think you did brought another perspective, and my colleagues in UNESCO, they know that coming from the South, I always say the first freedom that is taken out of African scientists is the possibility to do top science in Africa, because we don't have the funding, we don't have the research infrastructure, and we have to move out of our countries to become top scientists. So the conditions and the levels of investment on science infrastructure, on science programs in many countries in the South prevent scientists from those countries to really develop their science in their countries. And I think that's an important aspect. You also mentioned other wars, Palestine, but also national instability. So any kind of conflict indeed destroys and puts in danger the scientific community, in particular because they are visible, and usually because they also have stronger voices towards peacemaking, towards solutions to the conflicts, and that put them in jeopardy. So the issue of conflicts again brought back. And you also mentioned two other aspects that I think are quite interesting, and I hope, Karisha, you will continue exploring some of those. One is this respect also for the science that comes from the South, and this issue came yesterday also in another debate in this room, where many times science from the South is not well respected, and that of course creates pressure and demotivation, and in effect it's not protecting the quality and the autonomous capacity of other knowledge systems to do research and to come up with top research that is important for the world. So this, and of course I remember Omicron and also the pressure that the scientific community in South Africa had when there was no planes going to South Africa, no equipment, no research material for them to continue to do the top. But Karisha, you can speak on that better. But also this issue of responsibility of researchers. Of course, rights and freedom and autonomy comes with responsibility. And again, this was something that came yesterday in several of the sessions, and I'm sure it will come back to us. But then I want to move to Karisha and for your introductory remarks, and then we move to Matthias, Gustavo, and Tracy. Karisha.
Thank you very much, Lydia, and thank you and the organizers for the opportunity to contribute to this very important session on safety of scientists. And we've heard about freedoms that come with responsibilities. And I think as scientists, we are both citizens and citizens in the countries we live in, but also global citizens. And I think over and over again, it cannot be underscored sufficiently that partnerships and collaborations in these tumultuous times that we live in, with the convergence of multiple challenges that face us, a reminder, one humanity, one planet, and everything we need to do in terms of sustainable development needs to take that into account. Now, having said that, we do understand, know, and appreciate that there's asymmetry in the knowledge generation process, and huge divides in capacity, skills, and ability to respond between the global north and the global south. And the World Academy of Sciences has been playing a very important role with the vision of its founder, Abdul Salam, 40 years ago, having been established as a young academy. It has invested a lot in terms of gathering the best minds in the world, in terms of recognizing the scientific excellence that exists in the global south, but also in investing in building capacity. And it is incredible to see how 40 years of investments in the past 3 years in particular has just been wiped out through wars and conflicts. And these wars and conflicts, you know, it takes over 30 years to invest and develop an independent scientist. And when we have wars and conflicts, they are as susceptible as every other citizen where those wars and conflicts are taking place, where mobile populations, displaced populations occur. And to try and rebuild that is going to take decades. Worse is the targeting of institutions where that knowledge is being generated. And more than the current generation of scientists is the targeting of educational institutions for primary schools, for secondary schools. So we also see this intergenerational impact. Now, TWAS founder, Abdul Salam, sought asylum in Italy because his religious belief and a whole community of people in Pakistan were overnight being persecuted on religious beliefs. And the Italian government gave him asylum. He set up 60 years ago the International Center for Theoretical Physics, which remains a beacon in terms of science diplomacy. And when he got the Nobel Prize in 1983, he used that for the vision of science for sustainable development in the establishment of TWAS. In that period of 40 years, we've seen other scientists seeking asylum and being forced into exile for a range of reasons, either for the research that they are being forced to do, or for research contributions that was not accepted in the countries that they're in. We've touched on the previous speaker, particularly Cecil, in terms of social media, the disruptive platforms, particularly amplifying. And we saw it in COVID, because this is the first time that we were dealing with a crisis with all of these social media platforms. And the threats that scientists have faced across the globe in this period of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, a whole lot of interventions being put into place. And the very scientists who were chief science advisors today even have continued to face threats. So those are there, I wanted to highlight it, but it's really this issue of wars and conflicts. The numbers, I'm not going to repeat, we've heard it over the course of the past 3 days of displaced populations, the impact that is having. And TWAS continues to look at ways that we can support the scientists for their work to continue, for those pursuing apex degrees, how they can continue to do that in tertiary institutions, but also how can we support and the continuity of education through primary and secondary schoolings. But all of those, if we can stop wars, if we can focus on peace, we can achieve so much more. And I would like for us not to come to another World Science Forum meeting and talk about the importance of peace for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karisha, for this very final call for peace around the world. And you start your intervention also, one planet, one humanity. And I think that's a strong message that all of us have a responsibility to carry and to fight for. Asymmetries, you mentioned it very clearly. Also the vision of Professor Salam and the beautiful work that TWAS is doing, and we are very proud also that TWAS is part of UNESCO, but also that we are working together with the members of TWAS on science in crisis. And Cecile, as I mentioned to the dear minister yesterday, we will be working also with South Africa to see how can we indeed augment even what the efforts that South Africa is already doing. But I think we need to join all of us efforts to work in the same with Ukraine. UNESCO has been working closely with the Ukraine scientific community and even doing some evaluation of the impact on the infrastructure and how can we then prepare a post-war recovery, because a lot of the infrastructure has been destroyed as well as in Palestine. But you brought again social media, fake news, hate speech, something that is quite important. But now I'm moving to Matthias, and Matthias again, you are also related to academies and the work that academies do. So tell us what Alea is really bringing forward and what are the experiences. And if you want to speak from there, I think it's okay.
Okay, this works. So thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Lydia, thank you. It's a pleasure and honor for me to speak, and I would also like to thank the organizers and especially the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, a member of Alea, who have set up this beautiful event. Gerge and his team have done a great job, so many, many thanks for this. Karisha opened the last session 2 hours ago with a statement saying that probably we would all need some rest after a very dense program, and I do think it has probably not become better. And this is also not the lightest topic one can discuss, but I hope I can contribute a few points that go maybe a bit in a different direction than before. And I think the title already tells a bit that there are at least two dimensions. One is freedom, the other safety. Of course, they are interrelated, but I do feel that there's a wide range what that could mean in terms of a fundamental existential threat to lives of scientists, up to maybe on the other range that through funding limitations, not every scientist can maybe study what they actually want. But these, I mean, it covers both, but these are very different levels. You asked about Alea, just maybe basically why is that important for us? I mean, I principally feel it's important for any organization operating at the interface of science, science policy, or science and society. So in our case, we have embedded this topic as one of our strategic priorities, defending academic freedom and trustworthy science. In the interest of time, I will not say much about the organization itself. It has members, academies as members. It goes beyond the EU, so it does cover also countries that are not part of the political union. It follows the Council of Europe concept that is more a cultural and geographic view on Europe. And thus also includes countries that may face difficulties in this context more than stays in the EU. So it's a broad topic, and it's extremely important. So, I mean, there are some basic rules, I would say, that we would all agree on. Groundbreaking research depends on the ability of scientists and researchers to work without undue external interference. I think this has been repeated throughout the day. It has to do with the trust in science, and the second point here also mentions this, so that it's vital to ensure also scientific quality and to maintain this trust in science and the institutions that represent science. One aspect I think that is maybe more important for Alea in that topic is the institutional autonomy. That's the role of institutions. We have been focusing on researchers, rightly so, but we also heard that institutions play a major role. Lydia mentioned it in a different context. Often we jump from the individual researcher to the highest policy level, but there are institutions in between, and Alea is one of these. In principle, the rights of academic freedom as a fundamental right are enshrined in a number of charters, including in Europe, the EU Charter. Democracies have national legislation covering this aspect, but still, also in Europe, there are threats to academic freedom, both of scientists, and institutional autonomy is under threat still around the globe. Just I will say a bit more about Europe because I was also basically invited to provide a European perspective. But of course, the issue is extremely global. But so looking at the global reference framework, I will not go into detail because Gustavo will speak after me and he's from UNESCO. He will certainly say more about that. In Europe, those of you who don't know, there have been some major agreements at the high political level. In 2020, the German EU Council presidency focused on that issue in terms of research activities, and they brought together all the countries assembled in the EU to sign a declaration on freedom of scientific research. And more recently, the European Parliament, which is extremely instrumental in pushing that topic amongst the European institutions, has adopted a resolution on the promotion of the freedom of scientific research in the EU. Now, this then translates in a variety of ways into different principles of organizations. For example, the ISC, proud co-organizer here, has embedded it in its statutes. No? So we have here also, I will not read these, but what it shows is that this repeated aspect that freedom comes with responsibilities can be clearly found here as well. So there are a number of aspects that need to be considered when we talk about freedoms and responsibilities. The other point I would like to mention is that I think it makes sense to look at the different levels of actors. Because if we look at measures, it's really important to specify what are we actually targeting. And that could then also mean who can do what. We have to work together, but not every actor can do similar benefit for those who have needs. So in terms of the EU, this translates into 3 dimensions, saying that there are rights for the scientific researcher, and I might add here also responsibilities. It's interesting that this is not covered here. Secondly, the scientific research organizations carry obligations and have rights, and the public authorities have obligations to guarantee this at the level. Now, a little bit on Europe. As I said, Europe is not flawless when it comes to academic freedom, although challenges in the global south are probably more existential, with one exception, as we know, especially Russia's aggression on Ukraine has brought this existential threat to Europe, including to the scientific sector. And we have heard a bit about some initiatives here. Assad made a comment to this. So I can maybe say a few words about that later. Alea was involved in that. So how can we, and I'm now talking about organizations like Alea, face these challenges, and other actors can do other things? In our case, this is a call we did 5 years ago, together with the European University Association and Science Europe, to basically reflect a little bit that there are different actors who could do different things. Now, I think we could republish it today in the very same thing. It's a little bit the same what has been said by Karisha, so probably in 2 or 3 years we might still need to publish these calls. I have felt a bit of frustration over today where many statements said, this is very high level, there are so many principles we can all agree on, we need to put words into action. So here was the attempt to call the right actors how they could do this and how to do it, and I think there's still a long way to go. For organizations like Alea, what we can do is I think we should strive to raise awareness, to work together with others, to make, at least to point to those problems. It's important that these problems are seen. Those, in our case, institutions, and we don't have to look very far, being in this city, to witness some examples of political pressure in the past few years, it's extremely important that the scientific community internationally provides support, solidarity, and points to these issues so that they do not go unnoticed. Finally, providing solidarity and support can, on the individual level, can be extremely concrete. In our case, just a few weeks after the Russian attack, we worked together with the Breakthrough Prize Foundation in the US, received a grant, and at a very high speed, I think, established a funding program that basically had two aims. One was that the displaced scientists from Ukraine could be funded to be hosted by institutions in Europe. And the other one was to provide direct support to Ukraine to make sure that people could continue their work despite warfare conditions. And I think one final word here, you can see on the right-hand side, it's not only about the support. I think when it comes especially to Ukraine, but also other areas, it's not only about supporting, it's about learning how to best support these research systems. And one major issue was to think about ways of not intensifying, for example, brain drain, to make sure that people return, to make sure that what they gain from our support would help on the long run to rebuild the Ukrainian science system in a hopefully soon peaceful and independent Ukraine in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And again, you brought quite a few interesting aspects that were not there before. And I think this idea of the different actors, both on the exercise of rights, but also of guaranteeing those rights in place, and also the obligations that also change from actor to actors, and also the role of academies. And it's quite interesting what Alea it's already doing also. And also in Europe itself, monitoring the level, because it can change quickly and can be different from country to country. And of course, I like this idea, and Carisha mentioned that the right to science education and training, the right to do research, and the right to do so in a open and transparent and autonomous way. So I will pass now to my colleague Gustavo, that will also speak a little bit more about what UNESCO is doing and how we are collaborating also with other partners. Gustavo.
Thank you very much, Lydia. Good evening to all of you. The topic could not be more timely. Without adequate protection from science and scientific research, we cannot really advance very well and to the full potential in new knowledge and in what's very important for the topic of the World Science Forum today, this interface between science and policy, how to make sure that science will inform policy and leads to better livelihoods for all. And so I very much appreciate the insightful remarks by the colleagues, by the other panelists on this topic. And indeed, the scientists can face threats from everything from physical violence threats to online threats to slap suits to damage to the reputation to lack of funding or withdrawal of funding. And indeed, some colleagues made us think of some other ways that limit, for example, the liberty of some scientists to really be top-notch because of the conditions in their own country. And if UNESCO takes this very seriously and launched the program that Matthias was referring to, and launched in 2023, a program for scientific freedom and safety of scientists. And this builds on the 2017 recommendation on science and scientific researchers, which is a normative instrument that frames science as a driver for human well-being and shared prosperity, and not just as a source for growth and productivity. And the call to action on the freedom and safety of scientists, which was co-sponsored by 60 countries in March this year, along with a focused commitment in the recent UN Pact for the Future, underscores UNESCO's lead in championing this cause. And as a result, we have UNESCO's program and dedicated call to action on the freedom and safety of scientists that puts, I think, in a right path. And of course, Lydia mentioned earlier, for example, the International Decade of Sciences for Sustainable Development, and together with the principles of the 2017 recommendation are also a catalyst of the work of this program. Now, our initiatives will focus on 5 pillars, drawing from the call to action. The first pillar refers to engaging in an annual policy dialogue on the deployment of the program, and the elaboration of an assessment tool to help countries identify gaps and take appropriate action. This is a very useful mechanism we're using, for example, we have an assessment tool, for instance, on the recommendation on the ethics of AI to help countries identify where they're lacking, what needs to be done, and the same, of course, can be done for the safety and protection of scientists. The second pillar refers to enriching data collection by submitting national reports on the recommendation, and we're also looking into establishing and supporting a global observatory on safety and protection of scientists. Pillar 3 refers to enhancing the building of institutional capacities in Africa, leveraging the next STI strategy for Africa 2025-2034. For UNESCO, we have a priority Africa, and we really want to support the work on the protection of scientists in Africa, but also in the context that has been raised here as well in situations of emergencies and other conflicts. Pillar 4 refers to expanding the advocacy through major gatherings, such as the one we have here, the World Science Forum, and also other relevant forums like the Open Forum for Science in Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, Pillar 5 has to do with alliances, with working with supportive institutions like those present in this panel and elsewhere on the floor. So thanks to the engagement of member states and our other partners, I think there's tremendous progress being done, but much to be done still. And we are grateful for the support on this agenda. And with your help, good advice and input will make a difference on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gustavo, and also for highlighting the 5 pillars for the call of action and how we want to make concrete actions and initiatives that can indeed allow us to monitor, to act, and to engage the different stakeholders in really protecting this. Tracy, your voice is going to be a different voice, and I'm very happy for that, so surprise us. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, unexpected opportunity, and for the Hungarian Academy for their generous hospitality. I'm here to let you know about a steadily growing number of scientists you may be unaware of. They may not yet be on your radar, nor you on theirs. Many of them, in fact not most, have never heard of the ISC, IAP, GYA or TWAS. I think they've heard of UNESCO, but they represent a bottom-up movement of concerned scientists who are compelled to do more, and you should know about them. They are committed, passionate, articulate and brave. They are responsible science activists. We know the world is on fire, and we know that our global frameworks, conventions and accords are proving ineffective. Our governments continue to ignore scientific warnings, political inertia, misinformation and conspiracy theories, and an active disdain for the truth are all on the rise. The science community has been warning policymakers about the climate and ecological crisis for decades, but our voices are not being heard. We use multiple methodologies and platforms to try to get our collective voice heard. These are all good, these are all necessary, but emergency times call for emergency measures. Frustrated by the lack of progress, a growing number of scientists, not just climate scientists, but those from many disciplines, are turning to more active advocacy to get their voices heard. From publications to public actions. They do not do this lightly. They do it because they are compelled to. They cannot simply continue to document in ever greater detail a preventable catastrophe. So science activists are throwing their support behind social movements like XR or Extinction Rebellion, and they are taking to the streets to demonstrate and disrupt peacefully. Science activists maintain, and I completely agree with them, that this is not politicizing science. It is not compromising its integrity or its objectivity. It is another form of science communication and another form of engaging with the public, a common theme for this forum. Bottom-up social movements have historically affected transformative change. #MeToo, Black Lives Matter, women's right to education, LGBTQ rights, women's suffrage, for example. A simple act of peaceful disobedience and disruption stimulates media coverage and vital public scrutiny and debate. The IPCC itself has recognised that collective action through social movements can effect social change. Scientist Rebellion is a global movement of academics who believe that civil disobedience can help push urgent climate action. Moving away from their labs and offices and onto the streets, they also run regular welcome meetings, talks, events and campaigns. They currently operate in 32 countries in purely voluntary, bottom-up, self-organised, unfunded ways. They urgently need more members in very many more countries. Much of what science activists do is hugely rewarding. They join, these are all largely UK images, for which I apologise. Much of what they do is hugely rewarding. They join public marches wearing white coats so that people can approach them and ask questions, hearing about the science directly from the scientists. In being visible in social movements pushing for urgent and transformational change, they are affirming the reality and the urgency of the crises we face, not only through their research, but through their actions. And by doing this, I firmly maintain they are building trust. Science activists also target key stakeholders. The insurance sector, who insure oil and gas industry, governments who subsidise them, the legal profession to defend our juries and allow climate change to be used in defence, organisations who facilitate greenwashing, and here we have an example of the UK Science Museum with a coal industry-sponsored exhibition. In addition to marches, they engage in novel ways with the public, and in doing so, they build trust. They run Ask a Scientist Live stalls and calls. They participate in family days at museums with games and other learning activities for children and conversations with their parents on the ecological and climate emergency and the importance of taking action. They are engaging and they are accessible. They are scientists and global citizens. But of course, there is a dark side too. Some of what they do is not comfortable. It is peaceful, but it is disruptive, and it can risk arrest. Risks are hugely dependent on geographic and cultural context. In some countries, protesting is either illegal or extremely dangerous. And in others, like my own, the UK, there is an increasing curtailment of the right to protest. Social media, as a number of our speakers have said, can be vitriolic, and activists are routinely subject to online and sometimes physical abuse. It is entirely up to the individual scientists, of course, whether or not they choose to join such movements or practice advocacy in different ways, depending on their personal circumstances and their tolerance to risk. Nevertheless, there are multiple ways in which scientists can support science activism according to their level of risk. For every one individual who risks arrest through peaceful but disruptive processes, there are many people behind the scenes supporting them, often in very discreet ways. Through research and teaching, financial contributions, endorsement and facilitation, and active participation. You are here as leaders of scientific organisations, of networks and of networks of networks. You are here as individual members of the global science community and as global citizens. You are multipliers and you can help support social movements. So I have two questions for you. To what extent have you, as members of the global science community and as leaders of its institutions, given thought to how you can support and protect scientists who feel compelled to become responsible science activists who are trying to do something beyond traditional and arguably tired methodologies. My second question is, to what extent could this type of advocacy and activism shift professional norms for science, such as becoming an integral part of research evaluation metrics? In conclusion, I would argue that peaceful, disruptive science activism is a legitimate expression of academic freedom and a vital part of the global science community's toolkit for communicating science and influencing public opinion and policy. Leadership organisations in this room should recognise and support it in any way they can, not least in terms of moral support, but also the welfare and the safety of science activists. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and indeed you brought another dimension to this debate, and also a group of scientists that, as you mentioned, that we are probably putting them only on the activist group without taking out their own right of being called also scientists. And I think this again very much linked to the topic. Because we only have a few minutes to go, I'm not going to ask you the questions that were sent to you. I think we have a much more interesting debate to go. And after you have listened to all of your ideas and where you come from in different contexts, what do you think we can do together? In particular, taking the idea of the institutional framework that was raised by many of you, what can institutions like UNESCO, like ISC, like the European Union, but also like the academies, the research institutions, the universities, what do you think needs to be done now to really push this agenda as part of building trust, but also of building science for peace and using science to build peaceful societies? So I'm going to start from the ladies first now. Karisha, I start with you, then I move to Tracy, and then we move with the other members of the panel.
Thanks, Lydia. So my initial interventions was as president of the World Academy of Sciences, but with the collective presentations, I'm reminded of my own history as a South African growing up in apartheid South Africa, and how as a student, we had to be anti-apartheid activists. We did, when Tracy put those pictures up, thinking, oh, that was common sort of pictures. In fact, right now with the war in Palestine, we've seen the similar reactions, interestingly, in US institutions where peaceful protests have been met with the police being brought in or the army being brought in. And that was something I grew up with as a student, as an undergraduate. And my choice in career as an epidemiologist was a convergence now in democratic South Africa since 1994, was about bringing together that role of science for society. And I chose to be an epidemiologist because it was a convergence of science and human rights respect, and where all lives matter. And as you can see, I'm a person of color, and I grew up where my rights were restricted to extents of detention and a lot of other things that I won't go into. But I also chose to work in HIV. And in HIV, you know, it took us many decades before we had scientific discovery of triple therapy. And we watched in Africa, home to 70% of the global burden of disease, life expectancy dropped by 20 years because those drugs were not affordable. They were protected by IP rules. They were protected by profit as opposed to lives being saved. And it took a conference in South Africa in 2000 to bring to world's attention what was unfolding. 70% of the global burden of infection here, that life expectancy in the most economically active age range dropping, and the commitment by pharma, by governments, including the US government, taking that leadership role with PEPFAR, member states investing in the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria, that today, everywhere in the world, AIDS is a chronic manageable condition, and that demographic asset, particularly in Africa, of young people, has been nurtured, preserved for their potential to be realized. In 2018, there was a movement, a March for Science. It was a very important movement that was initiated. I remember doing this, like everyone said, crazy. It's in 3 days, how are you going to organize a March for Science in Africa? But we had 800 people participate. And then the next March in 2019, we had 3,000 people participate. So when we talk about science literacy and we talk about the science policy bridge that needs to be built, I always think where we are, we need an all-of-society approach that respects all lives, and that if science is going to be the hope that we want it to be, then we need to treat it like that by including everybody, and everybody means civil society. And these types of interventions that Tracy described, the March for Science that has been growing, other social movements, we've seen how social movements, unity of purpose, can bring change, positive change that benefits humanity and benefits all of us. And that's what I would say. I'm sorry, Lydia, that was a little bit longer, but it kind of took me down a journey that I had to repeat. Thank you.
No, you can be long. You deserve it, definitely. Not only from all the inputs on the forum, but also I think your true commitment to science for all. And I think listening to you is always an inspiration. So sorry, I'm treating her in a special way. Sorry. She deserves, Karisha, for all the hard work she's doing and tough work, I would say, throughout her life. Tracy, shorter.
Hi. Is this on? Yeah. Well, 3 quick things. I think whatever this, these group of organisations, whatever you choose to do, I think science activists will continue to work anyway, regardless, because they're doing their own thing in their own way. The second thing I would say is that social movements are all about solidarity. They do often engage marginalised communities. They bring a diversity of ideas and perspectives. They're inclusive, and I think we could learn from them and really be part of those movements. And thirdly, I would say in terms of we have very little evidence base on the impact and the efficacy of science activism, and that is something I think that perhaps this community here could think about, how to research that and provide an evidence base that helps the science activists further justify what they're doing, if justification were needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Although I would say it's not a matter if they continue or not, what we are trying to discuss is how do we open up spaces that I think that's what Karisha was putting in the table, to really have all these voices contributing to a change agenda and also to a much safer world, not only for scientists, but for humanity in general. And also because since yesterday, there has been a lot of discussions how the framework and also the social contract is changing, and how different actors are coming to play that need to be considered both by academia, but also governments, that there are other players that need to have space also to influence the science discourse, the impact of science in development, and that definitely includes civil society, includes also big pharma, big companies in tech, because all of them are having a saying from different perspectives, and I think the message of one of our panels, and I think it was Ruth Morgan, that keeps saying dialogue, 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 to really come up with a stronger position. But I will go to you, Assad, and listen to you.
Yeah, I won't repeat what my colleagues have said, but I'll say thank you for everything folks have set up here, and much of your work is very inspiring to me. One particular thought I've had is some of the concerns many of us share about what's happening with scientific institutions, academic freedom, scientific freedom. There's an infrastructure when things happen in democratic backsliding, civil society calls that out, and we name it and we discuss it explicitly. Perhaps we need to do that more loudly in this domain as well. I think about our office put out, President Biden put out a memorandum on scientific integrity, and that's worked well, and we've put that policy into agencies that fund science. We're already seeing the pushback of that. We're already seeing that becoming politicized in a way that's really worrying, and in a way that when you say scientific integrity itself is partisan, that's a problem. And I think we need to more explicitly call out that kind of behavior that is setting the infrastructure for attacking many levels of what we believe in, but just starting at the, of course we believe in these things.
Thank you very much. And I think it's a great point. And I will go to you, Cecile, because I think you also have some experience there.
No, thank you very much. I just have one point. I think, thank you very much to all of the presentations that were made. They operate, all of the presentations reflect the different players, which means you're looking at society, you're looking at scientists, you're looking at government, you're looking at industry. But one thread that goes through all of those, for me, where I'm sitting, and also I'll just give an example, is the trust issue across all of those stakeholders. And I'm saying this because in the South African environment, on the onset of COVID, the government was able to put down everything and listen to the scientists' advice. And this led to even a daily announcement that allowed us, especially from the Global South, where a substantial percentage of the population is not educated. But then when they get to hear the news on the preventative measures, what is actually happening, that becomes very critical. Now, the social media noise can actually happen, but the trust issue allows the real science, the real scientists in the room to stand up on behalf of government and with government, together with the social compact with society, to then deal with the pandemics or critical issues. For me, more than anything else, the whole thread across all of these actors will be the issue of trust.
The trust issue. Thank you very much. And I think that's why also this session is so important, because indeed it does build in trust. And you are right, it happened in South Africa, but it happened in many other countries. I was living at the time in Uruguay, and every night and every morning we had panels of scientists really explaining how the pandemic was evolving and what were the different things that were happening. And at that time, we did a survey for young people, and a lot of young people wanted to be scientists, because they see science saving lives. And in fact, that was a message that came across a lot in the region, that science saved lives. So it inspired young people to become scientists, because they wanted also to save lives. And I think this harmonious relationship should happen not only in health crises and pandemics, but should happen also on climate discussions, on biodiversity conservation, on water management, etc., that I think that's what some of these social science movements are bringing up, saying you have to listen to science, you have to partner with science to find solutions, and I think that's a very important one. But Matthias from Aleas, what would be your contribution to this final round?
Yeah, thanks. So one thing was, gets repetitive if you speak later, but I would also echo Cecile. So this trust issue, it seems to be like the guiding principle. On this, I would just say, and this links also to what Tracy presented. So when you ask what can be done, I think one thing is really to think of new ways to be creative and innovative in what we do as a community, right? So, and two examples, academies in Germany have started an initiative that's called Science on Marketplaces. So it's kind of strange, right? But it's against this ivory tower idea. So they just go to small villages, stand there, and I saw there was this one picture saying, ask a scientist. So it's basically that, right? That you really engage with society to build that trust, and that society also basically then understands of the values. A second, I think, very innovative thing and very related to the topic here was that scientists speaking out publicly in COVID, but also on other matters, face threats, no? And in COVID, it was like extreme, probably across all countries. In Germany, that led to the establishment of an emergency phone number that scientists under threat can call, where it's organized by a civil society organization and so on. So I think there are some very interesting ideas how this can be brought forward. So that would be one point. And the other point, and that replicates what has been said here in the morning, and also to a certain extent what the Minister of Science Minister of South Africa said with the unfunded mandate. I mean, when it comes to organizations, I think much more could be done, and that needs, we need to be equipped. We need resources. So if you ask who can do what, well, I think we can have good ideas, but we need to also seek funding for them. We need to be equipped, and at the level of states and funding agency, they need to equip us. So I think more can be done, but I hope we can really take it seriously, and not only the principle, but then only put it into practice, and that needs efforts and resources.
Matthias, there is a resource, an action that you don't need that much resources. UNESCO made a call of action for reducing the gap, gender gap in science and technology, and one aspect has to do with research institutions, with academies, with universities, with research labs, to reduce and to improve the environment for female scientists that don't feel safe, that don't feel comfortable, because the environment, the work environment is not conducive, as you were mentioning, Assad, for them to feel safe, cherish, and that they have a chance to progress. And that we don't need funding. We need political will from the leaders of these organizations. We need, as scientists, to say, this is where and how I want to work in this institution, and I will fight to have my rights respected. And I think this is a little bit of the point that also came across in some of the interventions, that sometimes it's not about funding, it's about responsibility, it's about the courage to fight also for your rights, and it's about good policies. We need good policies, really, that protect scientists, that protect academic freedom, that protect these minorities that you are mentioning in our own institutions. And we know that, we live with that. And academies are not an exception many times on their own structure. So there is a lot that we can do really collectively. But Gustavo, I think you will do even a stronger call than me.
No, thank you, Lydia. Very fast, because I know time is almost gone. Well, I would say, please support the program on the freedom and safety to scientists that I've outlined. And it's not a self-serving thing to say, oh, support the UNESCO's program. No, it's a program for member states. It's a program for, we need help in ensuring that member states adopt it, that there is a pressure on member states to adapt their frameworks, their legislations, their policies to ensure that the rights and freedoms of scientists are protected and science can thrive. Here it's very important in that sense, something that has come across some of the comments here, or something that Sir Peter Gluckman always insists on, which is the trust in science. Indeed, we have to enhance the capacity or to get the message across. I think what the point that you were showing is very good of the science, ask a scientist, but really we are in a situation where at the same time we're losing, and COVID was a case where there was an increase in skepticism on science. So we have to find ways to enhance trust in science, and also that means improving communication. And it's not just from non-scientists to scientists, but from scientists being able to speak the language of society, to be able to make sure that people understand why their findings, their work is relevant for society's well-being. And with that, I would end. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo, and I think it's a great call. I want to thank also the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for co-organizing with us this important session. But before I call Ian Marcos, I just want a round of applause to our panelists. Sorry that we don't have time for questions, but we are going to have a cocktail, so grab them. Continue to discuss, bring your ideas, because I think it's a topic that we are just starting to discuss, and hopefully this discussion will continue in other forums that we will participate in inside our own institutions and governments. I'm really looking forward to continue to engage with you on finding ways to really make sure that this call that member states of UNESCO put forward becomes really a global call, and that we can guarantee this trust in science, but also trust in democracy and trust in humanity and in development, and most of all, the belief that it's our responsibility to have a peaceful world. I cannot give any time for questions, sorry, I'm late and I do need to go to another meeting and I'm the moderator. I'm sure you can stay in the room, but I'm supposed to give the floor to Jan Marcos, if I understood well. Is that right? Sorry, madam, I'm sorry? It's a short comment, but what I'm saying is it's 000, and I'm already late for another meeting, and I'm the moderator. Can you stay with and do the comments without me? That's the only thing I ask. Sorry. Unfortunately, I do have to leave. I cannot stay. But Jan, please.
Yeah, don't want to drag this panel much longer. It's fascinating insights, and of course, my colleague Matthias has already talked a lot about what the EU is doing with the Bonn Declaration and other things. Now, let me just say one point. Freedom of scientific research is not a given. It needs to be defended, it needs to be protected, it needs to be nurtured every day, everywhere. And I think it's worrying that we're increasingly seeing politicians that seem to have the answers already, rather than being open-minded and asking the questions. And of course, politicians, and that's perhaps the shocking news, they can ignore the evidence. They have the right to do so because they are elected. But when they do so, we should hold them accountable. That's how democracy works. And we should hold them accountable so that we can really have this dialogue in society. But the foundation for this is the freedom of scientific research and the freedom of expression. Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a short comment. Loss of freedom not only because of political situation, but also because of the dictation of the funders, or according to the global agenda, or why not because of our socio-economic needs in developing countries. So that why all researchers should work on definite topic other than the other topics. We have to work according to system built from bottom up, where the civil societies should be heard, the scientists should be heard, and also the industry must be involved, managed by good system of research management, so that loss of freedom not only because of political situation or democratic situation, but also because of dictation of funders. Thanks.